can't be a leader. Okay, so very briefly, very quickly, my background: 20 plus years in technology and process leadership roles across a wide variety of industries, a bunch of different stuff in terms of recognition, certifications, that sort of thing. Like I said, I do lead a lot of CMDB design deployment efforts for a variety of organizations, especially in the financial services area. Over the last few years with K2 Solutions Group, the company I founded in '08, as I said, more and more organizations I go into, even if it's to do a configuration management assessment or service management assessment, what we almost always end up spending a considerable amount of time in is the organizational and cultural change aspects and the leadership around that. So that's something that I really feel is important, that more people start recognizing that once you have that in place, things actually kind of come a little bit easier to reach your goals. And what else? It's really about it as far as, we've kind of covered most of this stuff. So let's get started into the presentation. So we're going to focus on leaders, not managers first, and some of the characteristics around it, and then the assessment. So leaders, not managers. One thing to remember is, and I saw this image a while back, and I just kind of had that image of, the mother goose or the mother duck, kind of crossing the road with all the little ducklings behind it. And, they're not, the mother isn't pushing them along, right? It's leading the way, and all those ducklings are following in a perfectly straight line, through the lake or through the pond, across the street, that sort of thing. So that's one thing to remember, is that, people don't really like to be managed, but if they're led, they generally will follow. So remember that when you're, with your organizations, with your teams, what you want to ask yourself is, when you're presented with a new challenge by your superior, and I don't want to say manager, I'm going to actually intentionally not use the term. When you're presented by a new challenge by your superior, are you reluctant to engage in that challenge, or is there an excitement to accomplish it? Okay. When you see an opportunity, maybe that wasn't even presented to you, when you see an opportunity to take the initiative on something for your superior, again, are you reluctant to engage that, or are you excited to accomplish it for that individual? And when you do that, do you take into account whether this person's a leader you follow or a manager you work for? And we'll touch on that a little bit more, because there is a pretty significant difference when you're reluctant to engage in something, or when you're excited to accomplish something. You generally are not as excited to accomplish something for someone that you don't respect and that you don't follow or don't see as a leader. Okay, and that's just sort of more of a psychological piece. So talked a little bit about the the following and that thing. So why do we follow people? So there's a lot of different areas. There's a lot of different characteristics, and these are the ones that usually will make us follow someone. There's a sense of confidence in what they bring to the table, that there's gonna be stability. There's going to be trust there. They communicate well. There's a general passion for what they're saying and what they are doing, and this really all rolls into trust. Do you trust this individual in the guidance that they're providing for you to take whatever risks it may or may not be? Are you comfortable in following this person? Now, again, we're not talking about managing. You're not being told to do something. It's just something that you see in this individual and what they say, and a stability that they present, a security that they offer, and a general trust. So so ask yourself, who are you? When you look at these characteristics, do you find yourself in the A column or the B column? And this is who you are, not necessarily what you do. Are you someone that is more comfortable in organizing and directing or planning and control? Or are you someone that really enjoys inspiring and persuading, motivating, influencing? Are you charismatic? Are you a mentor? Do you look for the risk, or do you look for comfort? Okay, and remember, management focuses on work versus leadership, which focuses more on people. So with those same items in hand, what do you do from a position, from a job perspective? What do you do? Same list of items. Do you find yourself on a day-to-day basis doing more organizing, directing, controlling, coordinating? Are you an authoritarian, or are you influencing folks to get things done? Which one do you tend to fall into, and which best describes who you are versus what you do? So I guess we're not going to do it as a poll question, but I ask you to kind of reflect on yourself and say, did you pick the same list? Did you pick the list of, list A as to who you are and also what you do? So from there, you need to examine whether you are in the right job for your tendencies, your characteristics. The left, or column A as we had it labeled prior, is sort of more manager type characteristics, whereas column B, or the leader listing, is the more leadership characteristics. And it doesn't mean that one is right and one is wrong, because we need both in an organization, especially to succeed. But you do need to ask yourself, are you doing the right job that's being asked of you? Are you doing something that maybe is more inherently who you are as an individual? And if you are, then you're much more likely to succeed and accomplish your missions. One of the images that I really like using for distinguishing the two, between managing and leading, is the compass and the stopwatch. And like I said, management focuses on work. So focusing on work from a management perspective, you're going to be tending to assign blame versus a leader who's going to accept blame, or they're going to take the blame for their team. They're going to step up and say, you know what, I'm ultimately accountable for this. This is my organization. I'm going to take the blame. On the management side, they typically will take credit. My team succeeded. My team did this. Versus the leadership, they're going to point out the credit, and they're going to give credit to the team and say, that team, those individuals really accomplished a great thing. They did. So it's more they than I. And lastly, again, on the management side, when you think about it, I kept it on time and I kept it on budget versus they delivered it on time and they delivered it on budget. And the key line here, obviously, is leaders think much more strategically, whereas managers are acting more tactically. So what does that mean? As leaders, you need to lead, not manage. Okay? So it's not, again, to say that that they're not both needed, but what we do need to ensure is that the right job is doing the right thing, and the right person is performing the right role. So as a leader, you really want to make sure that you're inspiring folks rather than requiring. And ask yourself, are your subordinates following your direction, or are they executing your orders? If they're executing your orders, you're not really leading. You're managing them. Which, again, it's not that it's wrong, but the majority of you said you consider yourself a leader. 77%, I believe it was, and let's see, 57%, found that you're accountable for strategic direction and whatnot, which is great. I mean, that's in line with each other. But if you find that you are actually spending most of your time requiring individuals to get things done, okay, and there's a subtlety there, you're actually probably doing more management than leadership. And you can change that pretty easily with just influencing and just the way you go about bringing those challenges to individuals to get done. Okay. So we kind of covered. Oops, wrong click here. Sorry. So we covered the leaders and not managers, and We looked at the characteristics stuff, but how does that relate to the service management aspect of things, right? So let's look at that. We've all seen the pillars, right? We've all seen this a million times, and it's no different. So what we want to do is say these are the three things that we see in any service management project initiative. We always talk about people, process, and technology. We kind of switch up, how much focus is on each, and I think that has changed over time. So what we want to look at now is, what is it based on? What is what are those pillars based on? Well, it's based on the management, right? So without the management, there's no foundation. That is the foundation for everything that we build upon in our service management initiatives. However, without any direction, right? Without any direction, which is the leadership, we don't really know where we're going. So we need to ensure that we have some leadership in place to know where we are heading, and that we get to the right location. So it's the arrow pointing in the direction of where we need to go. That is set by leadership. That is our strategic direction, whereas management is our tactical aspects of how we get there, what we do to get to that direction. So when we put that all together, we have the pillars that we talk about all the time in ITSM, sitting on top of a solid foundation, which is our management, with a clear direction of where we head. Well, what happens when management is undermined by leadership? Okay, so when we think about it in that sense, it starts toppling over, right? Think about the images of, we've all seen sort of these cartoons or whatnot, the rockets that topple over and explode. Well, what happens in that case, not to get into too much of the engineering aspect of things, it's too much thrust, it's too much push from underneath, okay? And that's what happens when leadership gets under management and starts telling them specifically how to tactically execute. And that's not the job of leadership, right? Leadership is to set that direction. So if you have no idea of which direction you're going to head in, and you're pushing from underneath, the odds of succeeding in your initiatives are very unlikely. You're going to accomplish something. The question is, what exactly is it that you're going to accomplish? So, some of this is kind of like pushing rope, right? If you think of, the old picture of pushing rope and, pushing uphill, you really have no idea where that rope is going to go. It's not something stiff, and if you're pushing from behind, it's not going to get anywhere. It's not going to get to any direction or any goals that you are really trying to achieve. So, what are some of the tactics that we would accomplish, or some of the tactics that are found to be successful or unsuccessful? So let's spend a little bit of time on these and kind of walk through them and what you need to be looking for in your organization to be more successful. So on the successful side, for people, inspired to achieve, supported in failed attempts, and a willingness to change. Every organization that I've been in that has shown more success, what you want to do is really inspire those people and give them comfort that, hey, if they fail, if they take on a larger challenge, are they going to be punished for it? Are they going to be approached with, hey, we recognize that you tried something riskier, it didn't quite work out, we understand the basis for what you tried to do and why, however, it didn't accomplish the goals we wanted, and that's okay. Obviously, you don't want that person making the same mistake, 10 times, but acknowledging that, hey, yeah, it didn't succeed in the way we wanted, but we recognize the initiative that you took, why you took it, and the basis for going about that made sense. So it's not something that you're going to be, punished for. That is going to lead to a willingness to change. People are going to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to try something different, versus, protection is going to say, hey, look, every time someone has tried something, they've been met with ridicule or punishment and stuff, and people start moving into sort of this blind conformance model, which is really one of the worst things that you can do, because now you're going to have people that know that something is wrong, and they're going to just move down in that direction just because. That's because the policy said so. We know it's wrong, but you know what? We don't care. We're just going to do as we're told, even though we know that it's wrong. So, so that's just something that that we really don't want to encourage, and we want to make sure that if people and your employees don't don't believe something is accurate, that they're not going to just blindly go down that road. And that's also the motivated by fear. If you've got people that are motivated by fear, yes, you will accomplish certain things, but in the long run, it's really going to be a disaster for your organization. I'm just noticing a question here. How much does the effect and maturity of IT and corporate governance play in effective ITSM implementations? It's pretty significant, because what's going to happen is, if it's more mature, if the organization is more mature, what will happen is you have a basis for people to go execute their initiatives. They'll have a much better basis for what is at least deemed within the bounds of getting things done or not. So when you allow people to interpret policy or interpret or use a lot more judgment without any guidance, okay, you're going to have a lot more different results. And I'm parsing my words quite a bit here, because I'm trying to not use certain words to not imply certain things. But when you have at least the guidelines in place, you can allow for judgment. Whereas if you don't have any guidelines in place, what's going to happen is certain people's judgments are going to be very different than others, and you don't have anything to go back on to say, okay, well, based on the guidelines that we've provided, based on the guidelines and direction that we've tried setting, you kind of went astray, which again, depending on how bad it is, I mean, there may be some, again, punishment there, if it's that blatantly, against corporate culture and stuff. But it has to be, it has to sort of work together in order for it to be successful. Like anything else, if it's haphazard and people using their judgment, look, it's sad, but the reality is there are individuals, there are people out there that are not necessarily looking out in the best interest of the organization. They're just really, looking out for their own best interest. So we just have to be a lot more cautious with that. Okay. So on the process side, what are we looking at for successful and unsuccessful tactics? Common sense design, tactical with the strategic design. Okay, versus process for process sake, ITIL-topia, and it's a framework. The old question, right? When we'll start with that, some individuals again will take advantage of the fact that, oh, ITIL is a framework, so we can kind of just kind of make it what we want. And then the opposite extreme of that is the ITIL-topia. Well, the books say X, Y, and Z, and that's absolutely what we have to do. And that usually will lead to process for process sake. I mean, I am obviously a big proponent of configuration management, and almost every time I go into an organization, my clients are usually pretty surprised that I'm not a bigot about you have to go and do all of these details within configuration management, because I've seen the attempts to say, okay, we're going to put this huge enterprise configuration management in place all from day one. It's going to be fully populated day one. It's going to cover every aspect of technology, every aspect of the industry, of the enterprise. And I can almost guarantee you that 99% of those will fail, because we have data quality issues, we have data quantity issues, data duplication issues, cultural challenges. So the reality is it's not going to happen and not going to be successful if you try and do that. So, I'll be speaking to clients and I'll be telling them, look, we need to have a strategic direction. That's what our leadership is supposed to do. We set a strategic direction. We have a strategic goal. Those are goals that most likely and very likely we will never achieve the full set of. But we need to have them because we need to make sure everyone that is pulling this effort, pulling this organization forward, knows where we're trying to head. So we need to be all heading in the same direction. However, with that, the days of 18-month and 24-month projects without any successes and milestones along the way, those are gone. So we have to have certain tactical implementations put in place, again, set by leaders, run by managers, that are going to accomplish certain goals. And some of those tactical implementations, it's okay if they're throwaway, as long as it's a conscious decision of we need to do this because we have a particular issue right now we're trying to resolve. So we're going to do this tactical implementation, although we know it's not in the long-term direction of where we're going. So what does that mean? That means that you do it as cheap as you can because you know it's throwaway. But again, it's back to conscious decision making and using common sense. If you use common sense, whether it's in ITSM or anything you do, the reality is you're going to be a lot more successful. Where we usually fall down is, if we look at the unsuccessful side, process for process sake, ITILtopia framework. I always start all of my designs with, on the tactical side with my clients with a very high-level wireframe for configuration management. And if they're just starting into service management, a very high-level structure of just a few bits and bytes about what they need to do around incident and change and config, very high level, to the point that a lot of it would not be, at least by the the ITIL and service management gods, deemed as, well, that's not really ITIL. And I've told several, I says, I really don't care, because it's delivering value for these organizations, even though it's not within the the black and white scripture of the books. However, it's moving them forward, it's delivering value, and it's part of our long-term strategy and our roadmap for where we ultimately want to get. Some organizations, they're looking at, I use this in some cases where it's kind of the Charlie Brown Christmas tree, right? It's very, questionable as to how much of a tree it really is, kind of ugly, but it's something, and it gets you somewhere, and you recognize that that's not the end all. So that's on so we cover the people, we cover the process. On the technology side, let's take a look at these. And this is, I've spent quite a bit of time on the technology side with organizations in my career, so I'm a little unique in that when I walk into some of the organizations, having spent time as an enterprise architect, I tend to work a lot with their technology platforms and look at how we can work some of this out. And the biggest part is the scale of the initiative, the scale of the solution, and is organizationally appropriate. An example I always use for this one is years ago, I was with a big financial services firm, and they spent millions on software distribution and discovery and whatnot. I was speaking to an individual who came from a very small organization, and she was basically saying, well, my whole budget is less than what you spent on software distribution. And I said, that's fine. Says the point is, we need to ask ourselves the same questions. Are we trying to get all the bits and bytes together? Yes. Well, that's okay. So I can do that with 4 people doing an inventory over the course of an afternoon, versus maybe another organization that they're so large they can't do it. So they need to invest heavily on the technology to do discovery or whatever it is. So it has to be scale and organizationally appropriate. Consolidation, compound initiatives. What's going to happen is typically we have a lot of different teams because of the silos that are running initiatives that really have a lot of overlap, and we don't generally do a good job identifying those. So again, from a leadership perspective, we need to do a better job to say, 20% of this asset management initiative is really rolling over with configuration management or change management. So we need to get those technology teams and tools to work more collaboratively, and that will lead to some consolidation in the tool space. So if you have 3 or 4 discovery tools, you need to really understand, do we need all of those tools? Do we need, can we consolidate some of them? And that has a huge ripple effect downstream, whether it's from a licensing perspective, whether it's just from a data aggregation perspective, a lot of different things, a lot of different reasons why you'd want to do that. Big bang implementations, like I said before, we recognize, I don't think anyone is new to this. They just don't work. Big bang implementations typically just blow up larger. That's all it is. Sometimes, we deploy technologies, and all it does is really get us to the wrong solution faster. We want to put this technology in place because it's going to get things done faster, but if it was the wrong direction that we were heading in, the manager maybe did a great job getting that product up and rolling, deployed, in place, but the leadership set the wrong direction, and now organizationally, again, we're not actually accomplishing the goal. And that's where earlier I said we need both management and leadership in line so that the manager knows all of these things that I'm executing, okay, and that's the key word there, is executing, are in line with the vision that you have as a leader. So we need to make sure that all of those things are in line, okay? What else do we have here? The data sprawl, like I said, that's one of the biggest challenges. Most of the organizations that, especially around the configuration management, or you're doing change impact assessment, or the outage resolution and incident, most organizations just have far too much data to know what to do with, and it hasn't transformed into actionable information, and it sure hasn't matured into knowledge. And that's really where we have a challenge. We don't have the context of what the data is for, hence we can't really make informed decisions most of the time. Okay. Trying to move slides here. Just give me 2 seconds. There we go. All right. So we've covered most of the broad topics and whatnot. So focus is relative. And depending on where you're at in your organization, we're looking at solutions that are at the team level, or the department level, at the company level, and maybe even in some cases at the industry level. Having a tough time getting that word out today. So you need to look at where are you focused on for what you're trying to get done at that point in time. What is your focus? Are you just trying to do something that's at the team level, department, company, or industry? Sometimes it can build from one to the next. Sometimes it's just really a spot solution for that level. But the thing that you really need to remember with this is that leaders are at all of those levels, and you need to remember that you need to identify and inspire them. And once you do that, success is going to follow. So we need to make sure that you're looking at all levels, whether it's team, department, company, industry, who those leaders are. And maybe, and hopefully, a lot of you are those leaders. Again, you can be at a team level and be a leader, aspiring to be more at the department level, aspiring more to be at an industry level. So those are the big things that you're going to really need to identify. Who are those folks? If you are a leader at the company level or at the department level, look for those leaders at the lower levels and inspire them to grow and be leaders at their respective levels. And that's basically something that we all have to do across the industry. It makes us better leaders, and it makes most of our initiatives more successful by having more leaders involved in these solutions. So your challenge is, the leaders within. Identify the leaders within the team, the department, the company, and again, they're at all levels, just waiting for an opportunity. We've all seen it. We've seen these individuals. Sometimes they seem to be like the biggest pains to us, and they're annoying us, but that's because of their energy. They're trying to move things forward. They have great ideas. Sometimes they're not the most accurate ideas, but that's fine. But they're showing the energy that you need in the leadership role to get there. So we need to make sure that we identify those folks. We need to utilize what motivates them, not you. And so a lot of times it's really easy to kind of fall into this. You need to provide them. They need to have a sense of worth, a sense that they're learning something. There's personal development, and it's a challenge for them. One thing to know, and you can look for, there's a lot of studies around this space on this, money and promotion usually rank low in terms of challenges and motivation. When you look at all the other things in play. Many years ago, I had a manager that would give us a sheet. There was like 12 items on it, and we had to rank them. And he tried doing this every year, and they would be ranked in terms of, we had to rank them in terms of importance to us. And some of the things on there were raises, promotions, but other things were flexibility in the work schedule, family time, all different things. And there was 12 things. And when you rank them in order of priority, they usually match who you are as an individual. That's what you need to find out. So I strongly suggest that you create that list for your organization so that you know, if as a leader, what is going to motivate my team. Is it a sense of flexibility to get work done because they're very involved in their kids' activities, or they have other things going on in their lives? We all do. What is going to motivate this person this year? And that changes over time. Whether it's kids that grow up and go to college, that person is going to have a different sense of focus and what motivation, what they want, versus maybe what it was 3, 4, 5 years prior. So understanding what motivates your team members and your subordinates is really, really important as a leader, so that you can motivate them properly. Empowerment, delegate, provide air cover. Again, make sure that they feel, okay, and that it's not your perception of what they feel, but make sure that they know you have their back. You're going to stand with them. You're not going to throw them under the bus. And I guarantee you throw one of them under the bus, you might as well have thrown the whole team under the bus, because they're going to really lose. We talked about earlier the trust and the confidence, the security, that communication. So you've got to be really, really careful with that. So now on the flip side, the other thing that you need to really focus and work on is creating an environment of success. Are your individuals around you, your subordinates, your peers, do they feel that it's possible for them to do their best? Is the environment that you're enabling them to work in, do they really feel that they can get their best job done? Do they feel that they can actually accomplish it? Or do they feel that the culture around them that you have a part in creating is preventing them from doing their best? And again, that's that what we spoke about earlier on. Is there a sense of, I can fail and not be held, mortally, accountable for this? I can take a risk. It was an educated risk that I took. I did, I had due diligence around what I was trying to do and why, and I'm not going to be, punished, gravely for that. Teaching and learning attitude. They need to feel they have the opportunity to learn from their mistakes. Again, around that risk, you would need to encourage them to share what they learned, because what they try to do, odds are someone else has already tried as well. Odds are someone else will try that again. So you need to encourage them as leaders to share that. To, whether it's through brown bag lunches, through some kind of social media, whether it's a blog or whatnot, so that the other individuals that come along on your team next year, next month, whatever it is, say, hey, you know what? John tried X to accomplish Y. It didn't work out. Here's sort of the sort of a post-mortem, what they think didn't work out, why it didn't work out, and share that. Encourage people to share those learning experiences. That will make your team as a whole and your organization as a whole far more successful in the long run. On the importance and reward, again, people need to feel that they're important. And these are things that you can ask yourself. If you're honest with yourself, when you go through these things, what encourages you? What do you feel in terms of an environment of success? What makes you work best? Those are the same things that you really need to be posing to your subordinates and your peers, and making your team aware of. So people feel that they need to feel there's a sense of importance, and they're part of the success, and they're important to the success of the organization, and the success of that initiative. If they don't feel that they have a sense of involvement in that, and a sense of reaching that accomplishment, they're going to be less committed. They're going to be less invested in that. And if you want to go into much deeper analysis of that whole thing, look at the 5 dysfunctions of a team. That whole book. There's a lot of information on there, so look through that stuff. There's a tremendous amount of information around people's sense of worth and investment in successful initiatives. Just looking at one of the questions here. In your opinion, how much of a role does understanding the organizational culture and maturity to change play in effective leadership? I think it's huge. I think you need to understand there's certain cultures that you're going to really, a very small bit of autonomous behavior will be tolerated, right? And that's some of those cultures that are really steadfast, and, dictatorship almost. They're not going to allow a lot of folks, especially at lower levels, in the team level or department level, to really act out as a leader. They're, really driving from the top. So you need to understand that, because look, I don't, as much as I'm encouraging you to go out there and, inspire others and whatnot within your organization. I'm not telling you to go and be dumb about it in an organization that's not receptive to it, and get yourself fired. That's not what I'm preaching. However, it is something you need to ask yourself. If that is who you are you in the right organization? Are you in an organization that is meeting your needs? We're talking about environment of success, right? So if you're not in an environment where you feel you will be successful professionally and personally, maybe you need to look for another position. Maybe within another team, maybe within another organization. It's hard to say. But I know I've been in those scenarios, and I've left very good positions, high-level positions, well-paying positions, because I was just not happy. Long story short, to the point that, at one point my wife said, thank God you finally quit, because you were miserable the last 3 years. So you have to ask yourself, are you miserable every time when you get up in the morning? Somebody told me this a long, long time ago. They said, when you get up in the morning, do you say, oh, I have to go to work, or, hey, I'm going to go accomplish something today? And if you say it with sort of that down tone and that miserable tone, you need to do something to either make that position better and more enjoyable for you, or you need to find a different one. And again, that's just, you're going to be more successful. The organization that you're with is going to be more successful, because I guarantee you, you are not doing the best possible work you can do, and your organization is not getting the best possible productivity out of you if you're not happy with it. So nobody really wins, and it's just kind of a miserable life to live. What else do we have on the reward? On the reward, again, and I'll revert back to the second bullet in the top item, the utilize what motivates them. You have to reward them with greater challenges, but that's only if they want. Some folks are perfectly happy going in, doing their job, going home. There is nothing wrong with that, as long as you have a very clear and open discussion with those individuals, so that they understand that, and this is your job as a leader, okay, to make sure that they understand, and as a manager, I guess, to say, hey, John, I totally understand that right now your biggest priority is your family life, you're coaching your kids in this sport, you have all these other external activities. I understand that, I respect that, and that's great. As a leader leading you along, I think we can get a lot more out of you, but I also recognize that this is what makes you happier right now. You do need to understand from a corporate perspective, however, it's going to be difficult for me to promote you, to get you better raises, whatever happens to be while we're in this state. It's not a punishment, but that's an honest, open discussion you have to have with that person, because I guarantee you if you don't, in a year or two, they're going to be very upset saying, hey, why am I not getting the raises that Sally is getting or Robert's getting or Bill is getting? And that should never happen. They should understand, and as a leader, you need to make sure they understand what it is. So you don't reward somebody accomplishing a challenge by dumping 4 more, almost impossible challenges on top of them, unless that's what they want. Some people just love the pain, and that's great. We all need those around. But some people are like, you know what? Why am I getting punished for having just bailed these people out? I'm being punished by given another, Herculean task to accomplish. So just be aware that, again, as leaders, what's going to motivate them, and are you punishing them or rewarding them? Is that something that they want? Again, it's not about you, it's about them. So, just kind of final recap and wrap up here. Manage versus lead, manifests, administering, nagging, arranging, a gauntlet. Is that what you're doing? Is that where it is? Are you setting edicts, or are you, are you leveraging people's best capabilities? Are you energizing them? Are you assuring them? And are you directing them, from a, here's where we're going from a vision perspective? So keep those words sort of in mind when you're thinking of the difference between leading and managing. And last but not least, if you're not familiar with this individual, Rear Admiral Grace Hopper, amazing accomplishments. You really should just look it up. Look it up on Wikipedia and stuff. Amazing accomplishments, especially for a woman in her era. And she was quoted at one time saying, "You cannot manage men into battle. You manage things. You lead people." And that's something that you really should always remember. Some of the key points, where her history is in the technology realm. She's the first one. She was sort of credited with the term bug and debug for computer errors and how to fix them. She was a programmer. She was voted Man of the Year in 1969 by the Data Processing Management Association. Now think about it. 1969, women didn't, have nearly as many rights as they have now, and it wasn't still viewed as a space for women. Now remember, she's a Rear Admiral in the Navy, so she's already accomplished a hell of a lot by that point. But she was voted Man of the Year, not Woman of the Year, but Man of the Year. In 1953, she invented the compiler. So the compilers and eventually the COBOL language that resulted from it came from her initial things, and she was quoted as saying. She said this because she was, quote, lazy and hoped that the, quote, programmer may return to being a mathematician. That's why she invented the compiler. Okay, so look her up. Absolutely amazing story of someone that could not possibly have managed at that stage. It wouldn't be allowed. But she was an inspirational leader, especially for women, especially in the military, and accomplished so many things that had she tried to manage, it would have never worked. The only way she accomplished these things was by being a leader. And that, my folks, is the end of that. Let's see if we have any other questions here, and pull that up here.
Thank you, Carlos. People will be gathering. Yeah, they'll be sending in some more questions for you, I'm sure. That was very informative. Lots of pearls of wisdom in that presentation. I have 3 pages of notes here. That was great. I appreciate that. Before we get to the Q&A, and while we're getting ready for that, I'd like to introduce Pat Buda. Pat's our Public Education Manager here at ITSM Academy, and Pat would like to share some information with us. Hello, Pat.
Hello, everybody. Oh, Carlos, what an interesting webinar. I gathered so many things, too. I was writing down notes for myself as well. Thank you so much. I really liked, how you were saying that leaders need to be fully committed and inspirational to the cultural challenges and transformations they're doing right now in their organization. I really dug that, especially if you've noticed, anybody's noticed, our motto here at ITSM Academy is to educate and inspire. So that's what we want our learners to do, and bring those skills, leadership, management, or otherwise, back to their organizations. Love that. So that, I was really digging that. So, well, Karen and everybody behind the scenes is gathering up their questions for Carlos. I did want to remind our attendees today of a wonderful opportunity just to gain more of that knowledge, but of course for me at a special cost savings. So if you want to look for more of those strategy and design skills, leaderships, managers, whatever, I just did want to remind you very quickly that in the public classroom, we offer early bird registration discounts, which are 20% off registration costs, which is like huge. It's just like one of our best discounts that we can give to you. And to tell you where to find those, just visit itsmacademy.com, and you will see on our home page on the right side, it says discounts and specials, and there's all kinds of goodies there. But if you click on there and you find early bird specials, click on there, and you'll see all the upcoming discounts for our public education classes, and they do change on a regular basis. So if you see something you're really digging, please go ahead and register right away. We only do certain classes, certain dates, and they do expire. So if you see something that's really cool, definitely register. And actually, I was just looking this morning, and so if you are interested in the ITIL Intermediate Service Strategy courses, there is actually one up in April, end of April, as an early bird special right now. So that's April 22 to 26 in our virtual classroom, and that is currently listed as a 20% off early registration special. So if you want to go ahead and take advantage of it, go for it. And of course, if you have any questions or you need more information, always just shoot us an email at info@itsmacademy.com. Contact us direct, give us a call, whatever you need. And I think that's for me. Carlos, I really enjoyed it today. Thank you so much. I'm going to send it back to Karen and Carlos, and I'm looking forward to some more of those questions and answers. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for the discount, Pat. That was very nice of you. Thank you. We love a discount, so thank you so much for that. Before we get started, we've got a few questions coming in here, Carlos. Before we get started, I would just like to remind everybody that our next webinar is scheduled for Thursday, April 18th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time as well. And our own Drew Patton, who is our senior instructor here at ITSM Academy, is going to present If I Knew Then What I Know Now, Incident Management. And we're continuing on our What I Know Now series, and this webinar will focus on the most common incident management challenges and provide advice for practical improvement solutions. So we're looking forward to that webinar as well. So Carlos, we've got a couple of questions in here. You've got a question in here from Lanny.
Yep. Yeah. I guess just kind of repeat the question. Completely on board with everything you presented, and yet still find it challenging to obtain the senior leadership role where I can influence an organization despite having a leadership and management background. Any suggestions? Yeah, I mean, sadly, it's far too common, and that's, like I said, I don't know how else to put it, but, you know, sad because, like I said, in my situation right now, I mean, I go into a lot of different organizations, and frankly, to that point, the way I modeled my organization this time around, I've had other consulting organizations in the past. I was frustrated in that same manner. In that I'd look around my team or my peers, we had tremendous capabilities around us, and I just found that in many cases we weren't allowed or we weren't being permitted to really accomplish the things we knew we could get done. And a lot of times we'd be told that we had to bring in, professional services, and it wasn't to help us get it done, but it was to do it for us, and that was I just found it incredibly frustrating. So when I started out this organization, targeting basically folks just like yourself, where I'll go in and I tell clients all the time, like, I have no intentions of staying here. I don't plan on being a fixture in your organization. I really don't want to do that. I'm really more of an advisor and a helper, because I truly believe that there are tremendous amounts of leaders in these organizations already, and they're just not being given the voice or the vehicle to get those out there. So I know I try to, when I identify these folks, and I always do within organizations, I basically find out, okay, what is it that's really going on? Because most of the times they already have most of the answers. And, it's just a matter of how do we get that voice up to a level that's going to get heard. Sadly, there are some, and I won't even use the term leaders, but there are individuals in leadership roles that frankly don't want to hear it. So we got to find ways around that. So what you need to do is build up sort of a coalition, coalition of the willing, to bring those points up. It's a very delicate task, because some of these individuals, they frankly, they may feel that it's threatening to their position. They may feel that they just know everything. There's those out there. So you got to be very delicate in how you present it. Ideally, if you can, and if they're open to it, and some of them just simply are not. And in the cases, we'll do the case where they're not open to suggestions. In those cases, frankly, you're going to have to find a different role or a different department, different organization. Hopefully that's not the case, because that always creates a lot more turmoil for you as an individual. But there are scenarios where it's just not going to happen. I think we've all been there, where no matter what you do, your voice is not going to be heard. It's not going to be allowed to be heard. So there's those cases. So we'll kind of skip those, because we know what the real result of those are. The ones where you stand the chance of the person listening is you really need to find out what motivates them. Okay, so if we go back to some of the ideas that we were talking about before, what's motivating them, what's driving them? And you have to recognize that politically, or the political component of what they're trying to accomplish is usually a pretty significant amount. A lot of these senior individuals are really dealing with, especially in larger organizations, the same kind of dysfunction that we see in our state governments and federal governments. There's a lot of politics going on, and it's about, do I do this and upset this other one who's going to give me the budget for next year? Are they concerned about the overall structure of their organization and size of it, because that's what their budget and or title is based on? So you have to first understand what it is that's driving them, what's motivating them. Stephen Covey, used to say, one of his famous lines is, "Seek first to understand, then to be understood." So what you need to do is find out what's driving them. Understand them. Why are they making the decisions that they're making? And then try to wrap your ideas around that. And you're not totally hijacking their idea, but you're basically trying to embed what your objective is and what you think needs to get done, and tie that to something that they are passionate about, hopefully passionate about, and say, okay, here's how it will address these needs. Now, if you're doing it a little bit in disguise, that works too. If you know what's driving them and you know what their passion is, well, there's nothing wrong with kind of bringing those points out when you're pitching to them. And if they don't know that you know what their passion is, hey, they're going to see you as an ally, and they're going to give you that 15 seconds. You're going to have your elevator pitch ready to go on why this thing that you're bringing up to them is worthwhile to them. Because sadly, again, it's about them. It's not necessarily always about the organization. So how do we get to that level? In some cases, you may not want to, honestly. Not to be pessimistic, but if it is an organization that is really that top-down driver kind of dictatorship, and you're a leader that's independently thinking, even if you get to that senior leadership role, there's always going to be another level above you that may prevent or prohibit you from really being the leader that you want to and can be. So you need to think about that as well. But as far as trying to work that angle, the biggest thing is find out who the obstruction is, what motivates them, and wrap your ideas and proposals, with an undertone of what's motivating the person that's listening to your pitch.
Carlos, that's a great answer. Thank you. It's Lisa, and I'm interrupting this time because I have a question, which I hope doesn't put you on the spot at all, and you certainly don't need to tell us the organization, but I love a good success story. And so I'm interested to know, and I like low-hanging fruit. So I want a success story of low-hanging fruit where some simple steps, like you see all these, motivational books and team challenge books, but I'd love to hear from your experience, like a place where the first thing that comes to mind when I say who had a successful organizational change management and what tips and tricks did they use? What have you seen? Because this was a lot of great information, but I think a success story at this point is kind of a good way to start our wrap-up. Do you have any that you can just say, yeah, these guys did this? Because we like people that give some, me at the end of a webinar, I always like a takeaway or two. So feed me.
There's a few things with that, actually, right? There's, one of the first companies I ever worked for, small software product company, about 250 folks, and a couple of common things that I've seen that are successful. It can't be scripted. Basically, to build a community, it's like anything else. You want people to, again, they want to do this. They're not being told to do it, and they're doing it voluntarily. Okay, so you want to build that mentality amongst those folks. So the small organization, the CFO, I think he was at the time. I mean, he was just a regular guy, nothing big, but they would always do little things out of the blue, or at least so we thought, and I found out later that some of them weren't, but they just seemed to be out of the blue. So, and some of these we took on in one of my first professional services companies. What they would do is a lot of little things, but the one in particular that stands out, and this is going back 20 years or so now, middle of summer, he got on the intercom again, a small software company, about 200, 250 people at the time, and he announced that the ice cream man is coming. That was it, simple announcement, nothing big. About 20 minutes later, again said, hey, the ice cream man is almost here. About 5-10 minutes later, he asked everyone, non-essential, nobody, from the call center and stuff like that, or they left a few people on the phones, but everyone else he asked to meet down at the loading docks. We get down there, and he had basically hired an ice cream truck. It was middle of July in the Northeast, an ice cream truck to show up at the loading docks, and everybody grabbed ice cream cones and the zingers and the rockets and all that stuff. He had frisbees, he had some Nerf footballs and whatever, and we were out there for 15-20 minutes, had our ice cream cones, and went back to work. It built such a sense of community, and he did the little things like this all the time, that we went to bat for this guy repeatedly. Everyone stayed there. They worked through lunch to make up for the work that didn't get done, or they stayed late, and we did these things constantly. Now, you can sort of script out some of these. In my previous organization that I had started, we would always get sort of a biography of all of our employees. What are they interested in? What are their spouses interested in? We used to do a lot of consulting, so there's a lot of travel. We would always make sure that the spouse was taken care of. If they liked cooking, we would sign them up for a cooking class. If they were into golf, we would, maybe give them a round of golf. Again, sort of out of the blue, even though internally we were tracking what we were doing. And it was when John has been on the road for 3 weeks straight, and he's, really frazzled, and most likely his wife at home is ready to shoot him because he hasn't been home to do anything, and the kids are, going bonkers. Well, we would send housekeeping, or flowers, or chocolates, or we'd send them home early and, take your wife to dinner, on us. It's minimal. It's the little things that really build that culture. Now, on the flip side, I've seen larger organizations try to do these things, but they become very sterile. It turns out to be every Thursday we have pizza. Well, guess what? For the first month or two, everybody's like, hey, this is really cool. By the third month, people are complaining about the quality of pizza. So it can't be viewed as the norm and what we do every Thursday or every whatever. It's got to be sort of point in time. If this team is really kicking butt and they just got over a huge hurdle, you know what? Out of the blue, just bring pizza in for them, or do whatever it is. And those things cost so much less and they get you so much more that I don't see enough companies doing that. But the ones that I see doing it, these people, these employees, will go to bat, and they will go well above and beyond whatever expenditure and whatever loss of productivity that happens, during that piece. So kind of generic, but I mean that's I just think if you treat people more humanely, and if Johnny is ready to just like snap, send them home to recover. He's not going to get anything done anyway.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree. And I was on mute, so you couldn't hear me, but I was laughing about then they're complaining about the quality of the pizza part. Yeah, and I love the idea of the gift for the spouse. I think because here at the Academy, obviously, we have a lot of people who are on the road a lot, and that's a really nice idea that I'd never thought of. So there's Lisa's takeaway, and hopefully lots of other people on the call are going to be able to take that too. So thank you for that, Carlos. Karen, back to you. I know Karen's got one more for you.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually have two for you. but we are having a lot of takeaways from this, Carlos, so thank you so much for that. A couple of things. One is you were talking about the annual tool that one of your past employers used to give you, where you rank your priorities regarding to what's motivating you at that particular point in that particular year.
Yep.
Is there any specific starter tool or list that you could share with us about that?
Yeah, I mean, I believe I have an old copy of it. I'll try and dig it out. I've used it in the past, within my teams, so it's buried somewhere in the archives, I'm sure. But yeah, I can dig that out and shoot it over to you. Then you can post it on the along with the link.
Q&A.
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you. And then you mentioned the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team.
Mm-hmm.
What other single book do you recommend for leaders, and why would you do that? Again, quite a few years back I read, and it's a really short read. It was very timely. I was at Chicago O'Hare Airport. It was an interesting week with my partner at the time. I had another consulting firm based out of Chicago, and talking about direction. There was 4 of us as partners, and 2 of us had one direction and goal for the company, and 2 of us didn't. So it was a very stressful time. And I picked up this book in the airport bookstore. It's called Management of the Absurd, and it's pretty interesting. I can send you a link to this one as well. The biggest thing that I remember from that book was it talks about how essentially all of us are just a lump of clay, and when we meet someone, they form an impression on us. So there's an impact there, and it forms an impression on the clay. And that impression is always going to be there. It might get deformed a little bit, but that's really what we do every time we meet someone and we act on someone. We form an impression. And we, as lumps of clay, keep getting formed and deformed or reformed over our careers. And as managers, you want to make sure that the impression you make is not a negative one.
So, and as leaders, I would say the same thing. You want to make sure that you form them, that lump of clay that you've just come into contact with, in a positive way rather than a negative way. So, so that's one that, just off the top of my head comes to mind. I personally have read, I think, all of the Jim Collins books, which I think are great, and he talks a lot about the good to great, or what maintains great companies, and he talks a lot about the leadership and the overpowering leadership. So you look at companies, I think it was Teledyne, where you had a very, very overbearing and powerful senior executive running the show. While that person was there, the company was tremendously successful. However, it was through dictatorship, essentially, because as soon as that individual left, the company failed. So what was happening is they never were empowering other leaders within the organization to make decisions and lead initiatives. It was all being driven through that individual. I think Apple is probably a good example when Steve Jobs was there versus when he left. But Jim Collins talks and breaks down a lot of these organizations on why they're successful, why they were good versus, and one of the titles is Good to Great. So he's got a lot of those things. So those books tend to highlight a lot of the characteristics that we're talking about. The book about IBM, Why Elephants Can't Dance, I think was excellent in terms of transformation about Gerstner when he took over IBM and the things he did. Again, great items in there as well.
Great. Thank you, Carlos. Good suggestions there. We've got a suggestion too from Rick, so thank you, Rick. Rick is saying, I think the book Integrity by Dr. Henry Cloud is an excellent leadership book and is a must-read for leaders. So thank you, Rick.
I know, I think it's, and as I'm looking at my library trying to see how far the cable on my headset is, I think it's I Drive. I think it's a Christensen book. That one's really interesting. That's the one that actually speaks to the fact that people are not motivated by money. We always think about, give more money, but that's actually not the largest driver for most people. Once you get to the basics, obviously, if you're making $5 an hour, that's a whole different story, right? But what motivates people is typically not money, and I think a lot of people are usually surprised when they hear that. But when they think about it in their own sense, in their own lives, they'd probably prefer maybe a little more flexibility, or as was asked before, the question that came through that I was talking about before was not about I want to be a leader so I can make more money. The point was I want to be a leader to influence change, to make the company more successful. I've always believed that if you do those things, the money will follow, because you're going to get different opportunities within the organization or elsewhere that will lead to more money. If you're chasing the money, the money's always there, but you may not be very happy. If you follow, sort of characteristics that best fit you and into leadership roles especially, the money will generally follow with that, and that's not what you're chasing.
Right. Well, Carlos, thank you so much. I mean, that was a great presentation for us today, so I really can't thank you enough for taking the time out and spending the morning with us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure. And thank you all for joining us today. I just wanted to remind people that we do continue to bring you practitioner presentations discussing ITIL implementation experiences and the challenges that go along with that. And people really like to hear and learn from the practitioner experiences. So if you would like to share your ITIL story on one of our webinars, please just let us know, and we'd be happy to work with you to make that happen at one of our monthly webcations.
Yeah, and just one quick clarification. I had mentioned Christensen. It's not. Thank you, Rick, for pointing out. Drive is by Daniel Pink, and that's definitely one that, like I said, if you're looking at motivation and that sort of thing, it really brings out. And there's a lot of statistical backup there. It's not just somebody on a soapbox preaching. A lot of statistical background on what motivates people and whatnot. So that's a very good one.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Rick. And just a reminder again that our next webinar is Thursday, April 18th at 11 a.m. And Drew Patton, our senior instructor here at ITSM Academy, will present If I Knew Then, What I Know Now on incident management. And that's continuing on our series of What I Know Now. And this webinar is going to focus on the common incident management challenges and provide advice for practical improvement solutions. I know most of you have pre-registered for the next webinar, and if so, you will receive a confirmation by email. And for those of you that haven't requested pre-registration, we will send you an invitation for the next webinar. And as you log out, if you would take a minute to complete the post-webinar survey, we would really appreciate that. We really look forward to your feedback. So thank you again for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you next month. And thank you, Carlos. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.